Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As it turns out, it's that time of the year already. The time where I get to show you what I've done over the past 20 weeks. If you're unaware, this is the second part of a 4-part mini-series on my channel where I take what I've done over the last 2 terms of my school year and present it to you while I ramble on about the philosophical implications of such incredible pieces of work and how they are revolutionary for their time. What will probably end up happening instead is that I'll show you my work and say it could have been better. If you watched the last part, you'll know that a term for me consists of 6 classes over the course of 10 weeks, with a total of 8 terms. Since then, I've decided to lighten the load a bit and switch it to 5 classes for the rest of my time here, but have 9 terms in total. The idea here is to give me more time to work on the things I care about and make better work. At least that's the hope. So, without wasting any more time, I'll just get right into term 3. This term I had 2 non-3D classes, and one of them was Anatomy for Artists. I'm not going to show you any of the work from that class because I can't really draw, and I also don't like drawing, probably because I'm bad at it, but there wasn't anything I really liked in that class anyway, so I'll just move on to the next one, which was called Visual Structure. The goal of this class was to understand how to visually represent a story and how to communicate exactly how you want a viewer to feel when you want them to feel that way. I personally didn't care too much for this class, but on week 1, our homework assignment was to develop a very shallow framework for a story we came up with. I'll put the PDF for the general story outline on the screen right now, but it's a spin-off of some Lobotomy Corporation fan animation I really want to do in the future when I feel like I'm good enough to tackle it, but I kind of twisted it a bit to make it slightly more original, even though it's pretty clearly inspired by Lobotomy Corp in a lot of aspects, to be honest. Anyway, I really liked this assignment, but the class didn't really focus on developing the story too much more, which is what I had hoped it had been. But the final came back to it, and we had to make a movie poster for our story. I'm not exactly the best at 2D art, digital or not, so I think with what I can do, this was alright. I like the general premise of the image, so imagine it, but awesome and done by a professional with like a lens flare in the top for added realism or something. Overall, not a bad class, and I think I learned a little bit on how to improve stories, so when I do get around to making my own content, maybe the writing won't be horrible. But we'll see. Alright, now let's get into the 3D side of this term. First up is Animation for Visual Effects 2, aka AVFX 2, which is a continuation of AVFX 1 from last term. This class focused more on the previs side of media, and if you don't know what previs is, it's basically the quickly put together version of a shot so that a studio can send something easier to imagine to their employers and get notes on exactly how things should go from there. We had full freedom to make whatever we wanted, as long as it included 5 different camera shots, some sort of procedural environment stuff using Mesh in Maya, which is like geonodes in Blender, end particles, end cloth, and finally some sort of volumetric effect. Naturally, I decided to make a crappy temple, but all the statues were Vin Diesel, and the main character is also Vin Diesel. If you ignore the everything and focus on the quote-unquote storytelling and camera shots of the whole thing, I think it came out pretty well. I think the camera tells a decent story, albeit a rushed one, but it came out better than I expected it would. Okay, moving on. I'll do Lighting and Rendering 1 next. Lighting and rendering was exactly what the name suggests. We learned how to better light and render. There was no specific final or midterm for this class, just weekly assignments, so I'll throw up some of the ones I liked. All the geometry was provided to us, we just had to figure out how best to light it. This class was actually really helpful for me considering I'm still pretty new to Maya, and making things look good in it doesn't really come naturally to me. I don't think any of the stuff I did here was really noteworthy, but they were for learning, so it is what it is. That's actually all I have left to say on lighting and rendering. I mean, it was just weekly assignments. So, for the final class of Term 3, we have Character Animation 1, aka my bread and butter. So I expected a little more from this class, considering its title, but half the term was spent on bouncing ball assignments. I'll put some of them up as I talk, but we never animated characters until the last 2 weeks. We did a total of 10 dynamic poses over the term, but other than that, we only had the final and a long jump assignment before that. I've actually done a long jump back in community college before I came to where I am now, so I was a little familiar with it, but both the jump and the final were a nice refresher. The final was just a walk cycle, by the way, nothing too crazy. I did, however, try to take it further in Term 4. You see, our school has a little competition every term called Best of Term. Basically, you submit your work to the heads of the school and hope you win a category, and then get posted to the website with full credit. Anyway, I tried to turn the walk cycle into something a little more interesting and rendered it to make it look a little more presentable. But I only spent like 4 days on it, even though I had like 5 weeks to do it, since they're due 5 weeks into the next term. I literally finished editing the audio maybe 30 minutes before the 11 p.m. deadline. Long story short, I didn't win. I think the animation is nice and best in term worthy, but my presentation is pretty sloppy. Now, the bastards of you out there might be thinking, how could this animation be best out of every other animation in the school? Well, it wasn't, which is why I didn't win. But I say it's worthy because I go to a primarily VFX and games school. They don't have much in terms of animators, which then begs the question why I went to a VFX school if I didn't intend on doing characters or environments or whatever. But that's another topic for another day. Bottom line is, I didn't win, boo womp, try again next term, whatever. I didn't exactly try too hard anyway. Okay, that's all for term 3, and a little jump into term 4 since the best in term thing was actually done then, but that's not important now. What is important is that I show you the much more interesting and exciting term 4. I'll start with art of compositing since there's not much to talk about. So, art of comp is supposed to be the continuation of intro to comp, but in the first class we use After Effects, whereas now we're using the much better Nuke. This class only had weekly follow-along assignments, but it was quite useful in teaching the ropes of Nuke. Just about every best-in-term piece at my school uses Nuke to composite, and I can understand why. It's really complex. It's like all node-based and everything. That's really all the class was, though. Very informative, very useful, but ultimately not that exciting. What was exciting, however, was Creature Animation 1. This class was great, period. I had never touched anything other than a humanoid rig before, so getting to use quadruped rigs was a great learning experience. It's also a lot harder than I'd imagined it'd be. The teacher told us to think about it like 2 dudes in one of those cow suits, so it's 2 pairs of separate legs, which is a good way of thinking about it. Kinda. Where it gets hard is all the little things they do, especially cats. Things like when they lift their paws up, they close a bit and then splay open when they put pressure back on them, or the way their strides are offset and not as easy as moving a few keyframes around. We even got to do a few with birds, which were definitely easier, but I kinda stopped putting enough time into my work as I should have around this time in the term, so my work isn't as good as I feel it could have been from here. And this kind of extends to my other animation class, which I'll talk about. But as for the final of this class, it was to do 2 different creatures interacting with each other in some way. I chose this hairless cat and a chameleon. Both great rigs, but I opted for something that was a little more emotionally complex to animate rather than physically, since 1, I was doing a lot of motion in my other aforementioned animation class, and 2, I was getting lazy. I think for the time I gave myself, it came out pretty alright. There's a lot of smoothing I'd have done here and there, and definitely added more pauses between certain motions, but it came out a solid product in the end. While we're on the animation subject, I'll go straight into my other class, Character Animation 2, which is obviously a continuation of the first one from Term 3. Now chat, this one was a banger. I not only learned a lot in this class, but I did a lot of stuff I never would have animated on my own terms, which was great for practice. Something that I find funny is the first assignment is a normal walk cycle, and then one with personality, already a step up from the last class. This was a good reinforcement of what I already knew, and it taught me that there's more than one way to tackle a walk cycle. When it came to the personality walk and it was my turn to get critiqued, he pulls it up and goes, uh-oh. And I'm starting to worry that I messed up big time. You know, like, did I do the wrong thing? Did I not follow instructions correctly? But it turns out I accidentally did the prompt for the final, which was a balance assignment. And then I asked him, so, do I pass then? I think my favorite assignment from this class were the balance final and then the climb and jump, which was like week 7 or something. I thought my final turned out really good. Like I was saying earlier, near the end of the term I got kinda lazy, so it wasn't as good as I could have been. Really only spent like a day and a half on it when I should have spent like a week on it. But what's done is done, and I'm happy with it. If I went back to it, I'd add a little more detail to when he stands completely still, like add some knee shake, since it's impossible to stand 100% still on a ball like that. But me 4 weeks ago huffed some copium and chalked it up to fitting the cartoony look I had, so it was okay. Now, the climb and jump was definitely top 10 things ever created ever, probably. I found this great Samus rig that was really fun to animate with. Not really sure what kind of apparition possessed me while making this one, since I feel like it was such a huge jump in quality compared to what I've made before. I think I just really liked what I had come up with for the prompt and was having fun. I'm sure I've got all the versions of it up on screen right now, but I remember I had it to where she landed on the ledge and was getting ready to jump off the other side, and I realized I hadn't actually made her climb in any way. So I had to backtrack like 45 minutes of progress to add all that, but it ended up way better than that, so I'm not complaining. Once the whole thing was done, I actually asked my creature animation teacher what he thought of it, and he's familiar with Metroid and whatnot, and his first thing he said was like, "It's really good, I like the animation, but why would Samus do a very slow climb up like that after she just did a badass rocket jump?" He's right, but I didn't think of that until it was already half done, and I felt like the climbing thing was part of the assignment, so I wanted to keep that in, and whatever. It looks fire, and that's what matters. Oh, earlier I mentioned I'd be taking an animation I did this term to Best in Term, and this is the one I want to do. I plan on cleaning it up some more, smooth out the jitters, add some more personality, add an environment, and make the jump at the end a bit more fluid since I spent the least amount of time on that part. I think that if I lock in for this one, it'll win for sure. A lot of people at school agree with me too, which means this one is a certified banger. Unfortunately, that was all the exciting stuff this term, but the last two classes were kinda interesting. I'll start with lighting and rendering too. Obviously, this is a continuation of the last lighting class and was pretty much the same thing, just more in-depth with Maya and V-Ray, which is the render engine we'd primarily use. I'll put up some of the weekly assignments, but none of them I spent more than like 1 to 2 hours on, maybe. Again, the geometries were supplied to us, so we just had to light the scene. The only difference I made in this class versus the first one is that I composited some of the pieces so they wouldn't look like total ass, which he encouraged, too. Half of the time, all the textures in the scene were just not applied when he gave it to us, and there would be like 100 textures for the same object, and none of them were named correctly. Like on this World War II piece, I think I spent more time applying textures onto the tank on the left than I did actually lighting and staging. It sucked. Whatever, it was a good class, but that's pretty much it. As for the final, I had digital photography. This class was surprisingly more informative than I thought it'd be. It boiled down to making an HDR panorama image and what goes into actually creating one. Our teacher was fun and actually the guy who wrote the HDRI handbook, so he definitely knew what he was talking about. He had us go out and use the school cameras and take panoramas of various places, and then throughout the term we learned how to process them and make them more usable inside softwares like Maya for lighting. I like the way mine turned out, though I don't know if I'll be using it very much since the lighting is very diffused and not the best, but I think it looks cool at least. Well, that just about sums everything up for the last 2 terms. Pretty excited to see what kind of stuff I'll be doing in the next 2 terms from now, and how much better I'll be at animating by then. I don't really use social media or anything, but I have an Instagram I used to post my animations to, so go follow it if you care. If not, then I'll see you again in about 20 weeks. Take care, and good luck.